Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships, and actually one of a pair of replays where I had recorded them like a patch or two ago and then I'd forgotten that I'd recorded them, so I can't actually play the replay anymore, but I'd already recorded it, so I have the video file, and that's more or less enough to be going on with. Also, there is a cat meowing because he's chosen this exact time to start making noise. Yes, Samuel! We know you're there. We do. We do. Poor boy. I don't know what it is you're whining about, but something clearly is very, very wrong. Anyway, this is Menthel, who is, as you can see in the Icarus, Tier 6 British destroyer. I don't think there's anything too exceptional about it. It's got those short duration British smokes, but a fair few of them. It's got the very short range hydro. It's got 4 120mm guns, and it's got kind of okay stealth for being tier 6. It's nothing special, but it's definitely better than some of the things it can run up against, including that Gator. He's being a little careful here though, because there is a Cleveland nearby, not quite in radar range anymore, so he's been able to turn around and try and engage this Gator a bit. I mean, he's clearly hoping his allies will shoot this Gator, but also he's put torps out, and the Gator wasn't running their hydro, it looks like, so they're going to take one. And at this point, he's got a fairly serious hit point advantage versus this Gator, but there's also still the Cleveland to worry about, not to mention 2 battleships back there as well. Nonetheless, he decides to give it a go. He can always squirt down smoke if need be, and he's far enough away from the Cleveland that he won't be able to be immediately radared, and with having lost that health, the Gator is unlikely to try and push in and use their own hydro, certainly not when Menthel is so near to allies, and when that Icarus, not Icarus, he's in the Icarus, when the Gator is so clearly spotted. People are focusing on other things though, so it looks like this Gator might actually get away and live for a little bit longer. That's not terrible though. I mean, he knows he outspots this Gator, and as long as the Cleveland gets taken down, then he can comfortably go in and spot this guy for his allies. Talking of his allies though, we have a very enthusiastic Richelieu there who's just charging in head first. I mean, obviously the Gator's been pushed back a bit, but the Genizer now has got torpedoes as well, and there's also an Amagi which has lots of big nasty guns and who has taken not nearly as much damage. The Richelieu has taken out the Cleveland though, which is, I think, the only radar the enemy team have. Or had rather at this point, so that is at least useful from Menthel's point of view, and from the point of view of all of the other destroyers as well. Well, the one surviving destroyer otherwise on his team also, but they've also got the Leander there, who's another ship that's reliant on smoke, so yeah. So overall, this has not been a bad engagement, and the enemy team have lost a fairly capable pair of ships, but the Amagi's barely taken any damage, and they've lost one of their own tier 8 battleships in the process as well. So yeah, unless they can also make this stick. I mean, if the Amagi gets to make a getaway, that's going to be a problem, but if they can make this stick, then potentially they could make a good push round on the cap. At this point, however, and I'm not entirely sure of Menthel's reasoning, and I can't look up his email at the moment either because my internet has been down literally all day. I don't know when I'm going to get to upload this, but yeah, I even had the unusual thing of my ISP sending me a text saying, yes, there's an outage in your area today, and we don't know when it will be back up. Enjoy! So, that's fun. But yeah, instead of going back to counter that Gator, he's kind of left his Synop in the lurch, and I'm not entirely sure what his reasoning was at this point. I mean, the Synop is now nose in towards the Gator, but that's given them terrible angling versus the Amagi. So really, like, just looking at what was going on in the team at that moment, in my eyes, the correct team play thing to do would have been to help out the Synop, counter that Gerda, and as it is, the Synop's been taken down by a combination of the gunfire from the Amagi and torpedoes from the Gerda, and we've also lost that Gneiser now, who was then left alone versus the Amagi and other things firing at them from the Cap. All the while, Menthel's chugged over here. Now, I think part of the reasoning was he could see that the other flank had pretty much collapsed, and there's now enemies pushing through the middle because, hey, standard games are fun, right? And as he has come back to try and defend the Cap, he's now in a position to put torps out against this Scharnhorst that's pushing through the middle. If he hadn't set out when he had left the western flank, then he wouldn't be here in time necessarily to put these torps out, because this being a British destroyer, it does not get the speed boost consumable, of course. So basically the only thing you can ever do with a British destroyer, icon words, is put on the Sierra Mike flag, and if you feel like you can spare the captain points, you can also Swift in Silence, I think it's called. You can use that skill as well. And I actually do have that on a couple of my destroyers, some of my slower destroyers, because especially if they're kind of slow and they are more based around their torpedoes than anything else, then yeah, having that can be very useful. Or even things like the Swedish destroyers or the French destroyers. But French destroyers, particularly if you're going for a very unstealthy gunboat build, then there's actually not that much point in having Swift in Silence, because if you're running around firing at things all the time, then you don't get the benefit of the skill very much. Whereas I suppose the Swedes, you would more get the benefit of it. Anyway, landed some hits into that Scharnhorst, and between himself and everyone that's left, especially him and the Erland, who had the same idea to come over from, I think, pretty much the opposite side. And otherwise, they've got an Amagi who's being beat on by everything that pushed up the 910 flank, and the Leander. And the Leander, I mean, bottom tier match, the Leander has not exactly had good matchmaking, but versus this specific target, versus that Akizuki, if you can manage to hit the parts that will pen, if they're not completely bow onto you, then yeah, that British semi-armor piercing will actually do quite well versus destroyers. In fact, that's kind of the gimmick of it. A lot of people, I think these days, because we have now explicitly got semi-armor piercing shells in the game as semi-armor piercing, forget that the British light cruiser shells are also supposed to be SAP. It's just they're labelled as AP. Essentially, they're just AP with better pen angles, though. So, yeah, it doesn't quite work the same way as the Italian SAP as we have it in game. I don't think either of them is particularly analogous to real life, but what do I know? It's all very arcadey, this game anyway, so one can't complain too much when stuff doesn't match up that well. Anyway, we now have a new customer coming up through the middle, the Kansas, who's their last surviving very healthy battleship, although they also have the Amagi, who's down south as well, who's currently being focused by the Kaga. Now, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, why is the enemy team pushing in one by one to the defending destroyers? I could not tell you. It's especially baffling when the enemy carrier is still in play and could be providing spotting for said people trying to push into the enemy cap. And so even if they had still done it in the piecemeal fashion which we've seen, if they'd done it with some kind of air spotting in progress, then I think that would have made a big difference. Because only one of these defending destroyers has got a smoke. I mean, the Leander has smoke as well, but the Leander is less of a threat with their guns overall. Although, as we're about to see, those are incoming Leander torpedoes. Yeah, between all three sets of torpedoes, this Kansas is not having a good day, and it's actually the Leander that gets the kill. But yeah, the absolute lack of support from the carrier there, the enemy carrier, is quite noticeable. The enemy team ended up at one point being only, they got them down to like 100 points, something like that. And so they came remarkably close to winning. Except then, you know, they decided that they must win harder and all charged in one by one, and look how it played out. Now, remember the Gerda? They could, I suppose, potentially have withdrawn back to their own camp, but no, as it turns out, they went hunting for the CV, and although that basically took them completely out of the action, otherwise they've now popped up close enough to pose a serious threat to said CV. And we can actually see the other surviving enemy destroyer and the third overall surviving enemy, the Icarus, is coming up on the other side as well. So yeah, that cargo is now in a bit of a sticky pickle. That's a phrase, right? No, I don't think that's a phrase. There's the phrase sticky wicket, and you can be in a bit of a pickle, but I don't think there's such a thing as a sticky pickle. That just sounds kind of rude, actually, now that I've said it several times over. Do you think it's rude, Samuel? I don't think Samuel cares. Anyhow, there's a good chance, though, that they can take out the Gerda. They have done some damage, but I think their torpedoes must be on reload at this stage, and yeah, the cargo's done some damage themselves, but I think it should be the gunfire that finishes him off. Oh, that's nasty. He's taken some more torpedoes. Oh, that was so close. And the Gerda actually survived another drop from the cargo. He's living a charmed life right now, but surely it cannot last. And there we go. Finally, one of those hits lands. The cargo is not looking good. They're really not looking good. The good news is, though, they now dramatically outnumber the enemy team by a whole 50%, or is it 100%? I can never... I don't know. I don't percentages, you guys. I don't. All that's left in the immediate vicinity is that Icarus, and the cargo is now going to be fully focused on them. I don't think there's that much chance. Like, are they in range? It might just be in range of the Icarus's torpedoes. I think it's 8-kilometer torps on this, but the cargo is going to be fully aware and taking evasive action at this stage, hopefully. I have to say, though, looking at the points, even if they lose the cargo, because this is a standard game, they're still going to win, but they can't afford to lose any more ships up till that point. The main reason why I chose this replay, though, I mean, it's been an okay game. I think that there is certainly an interesting... Like, you can look at Menthel's choice to come back to the cap and abandon the Gerda and debate whether that was the right call in the moment. I mean, with hindsight, we can say, well, this is how it worked out, but was that the right call in the moment? But yeah, we get the last couple of surviving ships basically forming a bodyguard for the cargo. So we've got the Leander laying down a smoke. They fortunately still had at least one smoke. Erland can't, but Erland can provide fairly decent AA support alongside the cargo's own very good AA support. And Menthel himself, of course, also has smokes too, although they are very short duration smokes by comparison. But they don't need to keep the cargo alive for very much longer. They're down to a minute and a half at this point. You can see there the smoke from the Leander absolutely doing its job. And there we go, Menthel laying down his smoke. The cargo was briefly revealed, so I think he decides to move for that reason, just because in case planes come back and like blind hit that spot. But there isn't the time now. There's less than a minute, and you can see where that enemy carrier has gone to, literally J10. So yeah, there's no way their planes are going to get back up here in time. And there was also a little bit of yeah, there was some saltiness in the chat, which is, I was a bit sad to see, because this is the kind of game where it's come down to being very close, and it would be nice if people would congratulate each other, and sometimes people do. People show that kind of sportsmanship, but in this case, no. People were a bit salty and a bit mad, so oh well. Oh, no, Sam, don't push the microphone. Thank you. No, not helping, Samuel. I know you think you're helping, but you're not. Anyway, so yeah, partly it was the end of that match, and also partly it was that decision that Menthel made, and partly it was the fact that we had to tier 6s being fairly instrumental to the outcome of this tier 8 game, because unlike World of Tanks, it is far less of a bad thing to be down tiered like this. It's still bad. I mean, the Leander, for instance, if they'd gotten unlucky, could have been completely obliterated by the Kansas, or anybody really at any point in the game, in which case this might have worked out a bit differently. But yeah, despite that, you know, despite the fact that you have less health and less armor when you're down tiered, you can still do damage reliably to enemies in a way that you just can't in World of Tanks, at least not without reaching for the premium ammo, which just doesn't exist in this game, and thank goodness for that. Anyway, before I ramble on for too much longer, I had better wrap this up and see what this cat wants. Unless he's just nagging for attention. He might not want anything at all. He has been fed recently. Maybe he just read all the comments under the last video where he decided to interrupt me and decided that, you know, he wants to be a famous internet cat, Sam. You want everybody to worship and adore you, don't you? Yes. Because you're a cat. And that's just how cats work. Anyway, hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.